Welcome to the MetaView podcast. Here, these non-fungible conversations, they will yield you great knowledge and perspective. But beware, they might also make your brain go boom. So watch your step, because this rabbit hole goes deep. Good luck and have fun.
Welcome, Sebnem, to the MetaView podcast.
Thank you. I'm super curious. Finally made it.
Yeah, you were actually one of the early people to join the Discord server, but you want to say a bit about yourself for the listeners who don't know you.
It's always difficult, isn't it? Where to start? So maybe I just say that I got into crypto tokenized space in 2016, 2017, or the whole tokenization aspect of it actually is what gave me the last kick to explore this domain full time. Before that, I was actually a very happy researcher at a multinational, Siemens, and left there as senior key expert for cyber-physical systems. So, that much fun I had.
For what systems?
Cyber-physical systems. But I started actually as a researcher right after the university in peer-to-peer at Siemens, meaning as a computer scientist working with all of these engineers who actually do build roads and cities even, building automation, energy automation, transportation, healthcare. So there was a lot of things to research. And I specialized then in decentralized energy systems and went into all of the rabbit holes that open up when you are starting to see how people can actually consume or produce and consume their own electricity or power generation and share it. So peer-to-peer energy sharing was the thing that kept me going since 2008, 2010 for sure. But one thing that we were always missing is decentralized tech, all good. It was the same with, BitTorrent and all. But the decentralized business model and decentralized financial models were missing. You could only make money if you concentrate all of this and platform business, etc. But no one knew how to make a network sustain in itself. Until obviously Bitcoin came around, but back then I didn't understand that really, because from a peer-to-peer perspective, that was more or less pretty simple protocol. So the dilemma, blindness of the expert, if you will. Anyways, that's how I got into this space in 2017, seeing that there is definitely a new way of doing business, the whole financing of these decentralized infrastructures and the energy domain was buzzing. I went into it thanks to Ewald Hesse, who basically bootstrapped, if you will, with Rocky Mountain Institute, the Energy Web Chain, which is a consortium blockchain for energy. Yes, and ever since I looked into what are the viable token models that could power networks of decentralized energy systems and struggled a lot with regulation. In our sense, it wasn't just, financial regulation, but on top of it, energy regulation, and so on and so forth. We co-founded also the German Blockchain Association to deal with that in 2017. But till the last day of my employment at Siemens, I was actually in Berlin in the co-founding of that association. And then, yes, around many proof of concepts and work and exchange with the community here in Germany. Berlin is a big hub. It was back then, and it still is. Yeah, we got through what is possible, what is not possible, what is definitely possible in the next 10 years. And that's basically through all of that trial and error, I found my way into token engineering community. Also, big thanks to Sherman, Trent, Zargam. Zargam gave me the last push, basically, with all of the frameworks and tools that he was bringing in, where I could really then connect to what we can build now so we can get to what is possible in 5 to 10 years with actually building infrastructure, building all of the tooling that we need to manage these decentralized organizations that become more complex, more adaptive, more dynamic when you add tokens to the mix of that network and incentive mechanisms. And basically in April 2020, I guess, I know that meta game was around for a couple of months back then, but you were also just getting started, I think, with Discord and community building, more or less. That's also where I got the idea, or not the idea that was lingering around, but actually the push, the conviction that we really need to build and exchange more knowledge, make this more accessible to more people, of how do we actually design and build and deploy token economies with the right incentive mechanisms. How do you bootstrap this without external investor funding, which makes the whole incentive alignment much more difficult, etc. That's when I started to work on a Hitchhiker's Guide to Token Engineering, which is this community sourced and crowdfunded book on applied token engineering, and working through it, creating a course, getting into metagame. As in the beginning, it was also super exciting just to see the same, just to feel the resonance. And also, I really like the whole memes and the courage and the carefree kind of energy that you all brought in. That's also kind of motivated me just to experience this as it is, right? Not to try to over professionalize it, keep its freedom, its evolution, this whole unfolding of whatever is possible currently in an entirely decentralized manner. Some may call it chaotic, but I definitely see an ordering principle in there. Yeah, that's basically, I would say, how I ended up where I am today. And getting more and more back, I guess, from this whole curation of the knowledge that we have, testing. One of the things that I'm heavily invested in is this whole token model generation. How do we use computer-aided design, but also have this human-centered co-creation of such a complex domain, if you will? How can we make that accessible to anyone? And during all of that search and curation and sense making, giving courses, exchanging with the people, it kind of showed itself or emerged. Where is the starting ground where I can really bring in the as I mentioned, how I started decentralized energy, clean energy access, and this whole sustainable living aspect together with this technological paradigm shift, the mindset shift that we can have, but also need. How we can, or in which kind of overlap of those communities could we build something today? Could we get this started? Admitting to myself that energy is just too big, can't just capture the whole existing system and replace it with something that is better at once and fight against all of the current existing incentives. But actually, what is the minimally viable system we can start with? And that's also where the whole impact pirates emerge, come together, and that's basically in the intersection of intentional communities, eco-villages, who are basically grows in permaculture and sustainable living, but mostly non-technical. How can we bring them together with basically the community that we are embedded in, this digital nomads, eco-nomads, if you will? who are very much techy but know little of sustainable ways of living. That Impact Pirates, another one of those heartfelt projects that are currently going. Yeah, and those are, I think, the two projects which basically are also quite aligned with the whole metagame community crowd, or with that direction, let me put it that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I bet you never get a short introduction
Yeah.
under 10 minutes.
Yeah, you went straight through to answering the questions that I was gonna ask you.
Well, then that was the shortest podcast.
Great to hear metagame helped inspire you.
Definitely, I really enjoyed the perspective you have onto all of this, and so it was also the first tech community Discord that I saw that was really into what I now call the inner game, of the players, like not just the whole meme and make it fun, but also that you had basically well-being channel,
Right.
a philosophy channel, which we now also have in the token engineering community since last October, and where the best insights coming from. So it
Right.
was quite inspiring at the right time.
Yeah, I think it's super important because like regardless of like all the positive possibilities that this technology like allows, like, they won't really happen unless we make a conscious push to like apply them to good things.
Exactly. Not even in spite of the current system, but actually kind of in Aikido, using the force of the existing system and make it help us actually power this conscious change or conscious step change into the right direction. And I guess we're still in this phase of what is the right direction, or is there a right direction, or is there just multiple, and we just need to go these multiple paths and directions and stay connected while doing so. This whole mindset change. I know people, or all of the previous domains, especially corporate world, talk about these so easily, right? Mindset change, paradigm shift. We're going to disrupt ourselves. But actually, it's just really, really hard work. And there is no roadmap, which is understandable, but also slowly, I think we are also conciliating or synthesizing methods or ways through which one can actually embed this into how we do our day-to-day business work, live, to embed and learn and apply what kind of mindset we need, right?
Right. Yeah. It's not the degen mindset that seems to be dominating crypto now, like profit maximization.
Yeah, they call it yield.
All about the yield.
Makes it sound a bit nicer, maybe like farming. What could go wrong? But it's actually the same goal, the same objective, right? But to be honest, I mean, I've been before fully committed to this token space, which I would say it was really last year. Right before that, I was always like trying to bridge and make it work with the old existing systems, rules, regulations, players, what have you, and try to get them to understand. Even in this whole sustainability domain, I mean, it's not since the 70s, limits to growth, etc. All of these fantastic, eye-opening books, which we just now start to read and understand in the mainstream, if you will, right? It's over 50 years.
Right.
Yes, it's amazing, right? And there has been work, universities, professors, students, NGOs, what have you, and possibly billions and billions already went into. But there's literally no insight of what can be optimized for, if not for growth. And that's really, at first my reaction is always like, okay, if those guys didn't figure it out, who am I to, even try? However, I think it's what is needed, right? I think we really need to shift that narrative first and say, okay, like maybe they have been looking the wrong way. Maybe it's exactly that what we bring in now, this new, fresh perspective. And also, again, we have this opportunity to actually build things on top. Like Skype was built on top of the telecom networks of the incumbents. It's something that shouldn't be underestimated, and where you can actually create those step changes where sometimes it only takes to change the perspective to find answers. I mean, we're coming from, is it an era? Maybe it was just a decade or so. Can't even call it an era. That fast, that's how fast technology is moving, right? But we come from a place, right before we went into this, it was all about, the quantified self, and there's almost nothing you cannot read out of data, especially if you can combine it from multiple sources, etc. So we are very much capable of quantifying many, many other things and really running the numbers on them, on qualitative things, and make that part of the models, make that part of the equation that needs optimization for. Yeah, and that literally maybe just really takes courageous, bold, fun-loving people who just put one and one together, and all of a sudden we have, more than three. That's definitely possible.
Right, like none of these technologies existed back when people were still courageous to try this new economic system. Like, it was really hard to measure everything and have fast feedback loops and all of that.
Exactly. Yeah. The first reaction is like, oh my God. And also on the other side, their reaction is like, hey, we've been doing this for 50 years. We don't have answers. But I think, as you say, like people don't take into account not just that we have the same willpower, maybe even more, and feel the urgency more than them, but we also have these very different technological resources, number one. And secondly, I don't know if a whole generation separates me and you, but when I look really how aware the younger people are of their well-being, what they eat, right? Whether they are physical exercise and so on and so forth. So I think there's also not just technological advance that could make this transition, but also, as you say, like people's openness to this whole, how conscious are we? And then when I compare that to 90s, party like it's 1999, it was almost just about becoming a good consumer. When I look back, and it was literally the rewards were huge. if you look at it, but the system doesn't give that anymore. So people are more aware of cost, benefits, and question more. Like if things work just fine, you don't question. It becomes more and more obvious that this whole profit maximization kind of hits the plateau. And you have something like Bitcoin that fucks up your mind and sends you through rabbit holes. Then you start to question everything. But again, I guess number one limiting thought is, so who am I to even question? But I think when one gets over that, it's a super exciting time.
Yeah, there definitely seems to be a lot of questioning going on. Like people, I'm not going to use the new age buzzword, but the Great Awakening or something like that. But it's true, like people are questioning and they're not happy with the current state of things, and questioning everything from the government to the educational system to the way of living to capitalism itself.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that really is because, it's not futurists telling us information era is ahead. We're literally in the midst of that information society, information era. And like with anything new, we started pretty unaware of, what are the side effects. And once it's almost like an awakening. I always have this scene of Neo getting out of his pod, It's like really dark. and reality kind of seems, really just dark. But then you realize all of the constructs around you have served one system, and that system was useful enough, right, to get us here almost at all costs. It didn't get everyone here, but again, just as they say, the developed world. But at the same time, we then realize, okay, actually, all of the institutions we have now have been built, to make use of the industrial era opportunities, technologies, mindset, and situation environment. And now we're in the midst of this information era. And before Corona and before this pandemic, no one was imagining that it is possible to live and work globally. People, right? You're connected with anyone you like for any one period. You can work together. You can create things together. And the digital connectivity is actually super useful when you get used to it and make actual use of it and not pure consumer of what is offered on the web, but actually really use it to master or create your digital work-life creation environment. So that's been something I think many of us have been living in. I've been living in the past 5 years, and always when I was interacting with, corporations, SMEs, what have you, in the energy domain, I always used to say I come from the future because that's how it felt, right? But in the past year, I think a lot of people grown accustomed to the idea that it's not that hard, that it's possible. And also, I think they realize that it isn't just a subculture or anything, but actually it's a very productive, creative, connected community who's been, making a living like this and then creating and sharing and consuming like this for decades now. That's, I think, another aspect that could also change completely what is possible.
Right, yeah, especially with the DAO technologies, like people were able to like create over the internet and share and whatnot, but not really couldn't really form companies together. So most people that like creators were solo people, like solo content producers and solo consultants or whatever. But now we can form companies all over.
Exactly, like that was labeled the gig economy, right? I remember reading a piece, it's called Blockchain Man. I think it's Tyler Pearson, and I'll share with you. It's really, really good. It riffs off the organization man. It's a piece from, I think, 1990s, 1920, where I'm sure a known author, whose name I don't have, writes about the organization man, or is it in the 50s? Somewhere around where basically you work for the organization, you start there in your young age, and then you basically retire with one organization. The whole family setup, life setup is underneath that organization, right? And basically construct that with blockchain, man, and call this researcher, this techie who can actually almost just by himself create entire organizations or be part of organizations. And he likens what might be a possible way to organize is actually how big Hollywood productions are made, right? There are these people who know how to deal with pretty standardized procedures, tools, and they can come together and create this huge production within a set time, a year, half a year, what have you, and then dissolve again. And the whole value chain after that is also standardized. Like, how do you market? How do you distribute? And then how do you share that value back with the creators? Yeah, and that kind of connects now what we are saying and seeing as DAOs 5 years after the DAO, which was something completely different, but that coming from the same idea that we can have autonomous organizations which used to have analog organizational principles, etc., right? But at the same time, we're not there yet. What do you think? Especially because organization has so much human aspect, what I used to call humanist stuff, and my techie former self was thinking that we just need to automate it away, all of the human drama of decision making, etc., and all will be good. But I think number one, that will never be possible, and number two, or B, it's also something we shouldn't desire. I think we should use all of these technology and capabilities to have more human space, to connect more with nature, to live more. And for that, I'm still missing a couple of tools. And they don't even have to do with crypto or smart contracts, but more with knowledge management kind of. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we definitely need a better knowledge management and sharing system that can be used between organizations. But also, yeah, definitely agree with you on do we even want these organizations to be autonomous by themselves? Don't we want the humans to be the ones that are autonomous? The autonomous organization kind of the way it works is they just dictate. I mean, at some point they should be doing it themselves, but at this point they are just dictating to the humans. Okay, do this, do that. So it seems that the decentralized component is just the technological stack, and it's still a command and control system where there's a command flowing from the organizations to the humans. You do this.
That's what I don't like. Also before, I don't like the term knowledge worker. I definitely see it as intellectual investment, and kind of I would like the humans to be propelled more to that end and not more to the cogs in the machine end. We shouldn't be the ones executing the things that the machines cannot execute. Again, the matrix reference. That's the thing that I also don't see as very desirable. If we're still the commanded ones, knowing that that the algorithms don't create themselves with an optimization function that takes care of a global or local welfare as the thing to be optimized or what have you, there are still other humans making those policies, even if they are algorithmic policies, more transparent, automated. You can do, analysis on whether those policies were good or not. Those tools are also missing, by the way. But again, it's a slippery slope, and I think our desire or ideology of what it could be again blinds us from actually seeing the weak side of it, right? If we would just take it as it is, and we have no way to actually co-create those policies as humans and understand what it is that they're doing, etc., we are putting ourselves into this space where we're taking commands not from a human organization that is hierarchical, like a corporation or military, but actually that is now algorithmic, where you still know at the other end of that algorithm was another person, another human with all of their biases or ideas how the perfect system looks like, and that's the dangerous part of it.
Yeah, then the worst part is that the people who agree to accept these new algorithms are just the people with most tokens.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's actually one thing that really gets me going. In a sense, I always say early adopters, they have a special place in heaven because without those really people who root for the new possibilities and who help you build it when there is nothing there, right? Who try and do see the same as you, they do deserve their fair share, definitely, right? But then the whole distribution mechanisms after that, if you don't get a handle on that, we're creating these, or we have already recreated these plutocracies, where if you look at, who are the token holders, it's the same like in the early days of getting into America, right? These are, again, the people, few white men who have the most land. And one thing that I really see as another slippery slope is right now everything seems fair, right? Because everything happens in the crypto space, like DeFi, etc. It's all in this crypto space that created itself. The whole evolution of it, etc., is internal. It's crypto money that goes around and comes around often, but that starts to change, right? People are now, I don't know, taking loans or another mortgage on their homes to participate in this crypto, always in the bull market, when it's really almost impossible that you are not going to lose your last third when the music stops playing. Again, this is again not so fair anymore, right? Then you have basically the newcomers who should be benefiting most of that, or people who want to use it in their domains in the physical world, who will lose the most, like indigenous people. And that's basically coming back to Impact Pirates, for example, right? We want to connect eco villages with this digital nomad, knowing the connection will be mostly in this whole, how can we make this technological possibilities work for eco villages. And why eco villages? Because they're basically focused, or they know the value of self-sufficiency, self-sovereignty, if you will, and where the alignment and the independence that is needed to try these things out in the physical or in the systems that are still embedded in the old system, partially. There again, it's this knowledge difference, the most crass or the most difficult. If we don't bridge that knowledge gap, then most likely those connections that we make might be even harmful, right? And the only thing that where I see how we can actually improve that is really through knowledge exchange, by sharing that the initial intellectual investment, if you will, with people who are entering the space or who want to make use of the technologies from the space in their current network, in their current ways of living. There, really, this co-creation, knowledge sharing becomes super important.
Yeah, for sure. You need to explain to these new people who come here that if they think they're going to get rich quick, they are most likely going to get poor quick.
The other way around, yeah. How do you make that work? For example, when people enter metagame, you have now so much more experience of how to deal with that, etc. It's called onboarding, more or less. But how do you get the people to see the game?
Yeah, the missing piece in crypto, like, and that's like we're trying to like fill in the hole here, like by part of the way was by writing these narratives basically, and just explain to people like why are we here and what are we trying to do, and like explain different paths. So there is not just about speculation, but like a path of value creation, and like instead of spraying your money on like 10 shit coins that promise high gains, that you should instead like get personally involved in just a few projects and then stay committed to those projects and things like that. Like, yeah, we're trying to build this narrative, and then from here we are moving on to writing these playbooks, which are supposed to be like short guides to like getting involved in crypto.
Cool. Yeah, playbooks. We also had that discussion with another project that I was involved for a time. It's not best practice, right? Because there is no standard way, but actually give them the lay of the land and the handles. Okay, like mechanics, what do you need to get started even, but how do you navigate this space?
Yeah, and that was my idea with the playbooks. That like instead of like writing a guide for like how to install a wallet, we would make a guide like how to join the DAO space as a non-technical person. Like more about onboarding than like actual how to for doing something technical. And yeah, we're not trying to like offer like this is the playbook for this, but more so trying to get like a lot of people to write even the same playbook. So there should probably be like 10 playbooks on like how to join the DAO space, and then people can move into the stage of designing an interface for this, where people will be able to react to these playbooks, comment, and at some point fork them, like create updates and create new ones.
Cool. So multiple perspectives, and if one playbook isn't for me, maybe the other 9 is going to get me
Right.
to see, right, or have my perspective resonate with my connect to my story, so I get a foothold.
Right. Yeah, I definitely don't want to be like, okay, this is the playbook for this is the playbook for that. Like, there's that's just not the way.
Yeah. So that's something, for example, I'm still unlearning. As I mentioned, like everything I learned was really from literally control theory and industrial automation. So, and literally there is this notion of we can control everything, and that's one thing. Or we need to make everything controllable, predictable, and constrain it so we at the very least have the illusion of. And basically, it's really brought or starting to settle in what it means to actually, again, Donella Meadows, 70s, absolute mother of systems thinkers. She wrote so many pieces that are so obvious now. Years ago, again, it must have, been. It's like a prophecy, but she has pieces that they like, dancing with systems, how you behave, the soft side of it, but also what is currently happening is this whole complexity economics comes from the fringes of economics and actually literally just, tells the economist emperors, the traditional economist emperors and neoclassical theories basically are naked. They make assumptions so that the wonderful math works out, but
Right.
those assumptions don't hold in reality, and that's what the data shows, that's what the crashes show over and over, that the theories don't even explain after the fact what happened, let alone be able to predict anything, and complex economics goes into that direction. Literally, as you said, there is no one way. There is no one operational manual or operator's handbook to this. So that's one thing. And what I'm really into currently is game-based learning. Game-based learning in organizational or in organizations and teams. That's been also around for quite a while, and it's tried to be, mainstreamed into corporate world with serious play and stuff like this. But the way we found it is actually within these games, you are play out your own systems thinking. You get a feel for the dynamics, and depending on, of course, how the game is designed, what kind of aspects should be revealed. Basically, you can really create this individualized, more or less learning experience as well as peer learning experience and or social learning, right? And that's something I also find quite intriguing. Number one, because of its connection to dynamics and again, like systems thinking, designing a game actually, doesn't just give you system literacy, but actually fluency, things that cannot be planned, that will turn out very differently than you thought, especially when the players get to co-create or change rules. again, all of these things resonate a lot with the type of learning we need, again, to understand and navigate this space. And also the co-creation aspect, it's easier said than done.
Yeah.
So if we could get really people to have an easy access and to play around with these systems before having to go and test and live in prod and figure out what things can go wrong and then never enter again. Yeah, going into this whole game-based domain really speaks to me. And with Impact Pirates, actually wants to find other players in this intersection of intentional community and, as I mentioned, crypto token engineers or Web3 token engineering people to get them kind of work together without really get them to help each other, if you will, with what they can provide, offer knowledge-wise, and give them a place to connect it. But the first feedback we got actually from someone, I'm sure you know, Grace Rahmani as well, who is very much in the organizational or human side of decentralized organizations. And at that time, she was also basically visiting eco villages, really from village to village, for her project, Voice of Humanity, also, connecting this, collectively in dialogue, exchanging with people who live in eco villages. How can we create this sustainable, sufficient value exchange? How can we make that? How can we connect those values that exist that we create to make it sustainable for everyone involved? And when we basically sat down to play and get her feedback, she was like, no, people who live in eco villages, who have to garden, who have to work hard for, getting food on the table, they don't have time to play games. And that's right. But then at the same time, the same is true for, they don't have time to understand my geek speak and what have you. So we do need to find a common ground, in my view. And maybe also, not start with any standard eco village, but also, there are many out there, especially like smart village futures thinkers. That was also one of the hopes. Like at some point, there will be other these local sustainable living places and spaces who do not entirely neglect the technology, but actually make it part of that lifestyle and connect the best, basically, or the most useful ways of that. So, that's basically the current, or what we have currently on the table, to help people co-create, give them a place where they can have or create their common language and make those games, not just a game, why should I play a game, but actually really on one side speaking to their needs, knowing at the end of a round they will have learned something, or at the very least they will have a financial simulation, of what they want to build, etc., and maybe get some hints how they could raise funds and so with these new technologies, how they could connect to other villages, and especially as I mentioned, this whole digital nomad, as you said, like the lonely, or not lonely, but the single, or people who come from this gig economy who weren't quite connected, but again, who found their own ways of working, co-working across the space. So there is this connection that I see. And if you could make that into connecting the haves and needs, right, and use this technology, we could really have this global sustainable values being exchanged. So that's the current aspect that gets me going, this learning in open dynamic systems where people have very different perspectives and even very different languages and cultures, but give them an opportunity to learn from each other and also share that learning with Impact Pirates,
Yeah, I'm definitely seeing these digital nomads will be the pollinators of this whole movement. these like eco villages, this is kind of the what I came from to the crypto. I mean, I actually haven't personally been to an eco village, but like years back, I don't know if have you watched maybe the Zeitgeist documentaries or the the Venus Project. So that's like when I was in grade school, those were my favorite documentaries, and so I was always interested in those like sort of alternative economies and researching that and all the like the self-sustainable villages and different ways of organizing small societies, and that was like what I was always interested in. And then when I found crypto, it was like, oh, like this is technological layer to allow like for these kind of societies to actually scale above the numbers number. That's why my mind was so blown away by crypto. And yeah, kind of what I'm trying to play out here at MetaView, like doing this giant online experiment and hopefully, yeah, establish this sort of like resource-based economy. I mean, by Jacques Fresco's definition, the resource-based economy is not supposed to have any sort of market. But yeah, the way I see it is like all of these like virtual communities will have their own tokens, like different DAOs. And Raid Guild has their own token, which is used for like hiring them to build. And there are other communities like design will have their own design tokens. And at some point, we should be able to just build things together without like needing any external money, just like sharing tokens between these communities. Okay, this token represents this token represents this resource. You can just get to building, and yeah, hopefully in some way that we'll be able to connect that with the physical world.
That's so cool, you know. I mean, imagine possibly we couldn't be more different. Have so many different backgrounds, right? But then it's so energizing, you know, when I hear that we do. It's almost like a shared vision.
Yeah,
That,
definitely.
you know what I mean? That this and we just come to this or come together and literally have parts of that shared vision. And you know what? How hard CEOs and all of these companies try to create a shared vision, alignment, and aligned incentives. What fascinates me in this space, token engineering, etc., but also just this conversation with you, right? And the past years we had, I don't know, few interactions, right? And that's probably the longest time we talked together. But you know, we've been connecting, exchanging, and just hearing that, and literally just amazing. I'm going to look into Jack Fresco tonight, so that's for sure. And definitely let's talk again, because one of the projects that really turned or that really helped me unlearn is Invisible Economy from the
Yeah,
Dada.art collective. And they create this visual conversations, collaborative art on the Dada platform. And basically, they are decentralizing, right? And then and figuring it out. But the goal of all of this is like literally they want to get rid of the market that only can commodify to be able to exchange things, right? And when you look at crypto art and what have you, it's the same game. You know, it's trying to make the number go up, etc. And they literally like, but that doesn't change the game for the creators.
right.
And Bea wrote this white paper together with or with feedback, you know, from Primavera and Radical Exchange and so on and so forth. So quite a few insights, and she literally goes into literally very, very good argumentation setup as saying how actually this extrinsic reward, the way we look at or we have been looking at tokenized incentives, that you just throw rewards at one person and
Mm.
make them do things that might work for, you know, if you really need this extrinsic push that the task is so standardized, you just need to go through this another 8 hours a day, then yes, extrinsic rewards can be very helpful, very useful. And it's not this or the other, but what we know is actually intrinsic motivation that for creation of art or science, knowledge, right? Coming up with meta game is also very creative. Like if someone gave you, I don't know, maybe it depends, let's see your worldview on that. But basically, having that freedom to create, also to explore, etc., and not deliver standard version within a set time with the based parameters, if you will, like that would be commissioning of art. So getting rid of that, using this technology and the paradigm shift that it also brought, also understanding how markets work, financial acumen, etc., use this to actually get rid of the market mechanisms and to still capture the value that they create and share it, but just share it differently.
Mm-hmm.
And this is literally what this is about. We can share it across the globe. We can program it under which logic it should share that value, and we can definitely capture it in ways that wasn't possible before, without enforcing or without having an enforcement. Yeah, how do you call it? Or using the automation in enforcement, if you will. I mean, everywhere where people are involved, you will still need conflict management and resolution of misunderstandings, etc. And that's, again, as you say, one of those areas in decentralized organization that still remains or will remain. But in a sense, that's the possibility to make those transactions still happen, still capture the value, still share the value, but make those transactions invisible. Like the way we don't, have to type in IP numbers anymore. We don't necessarily have to have a CEO, CFO, CMO, an accountant, and a legal, division or person or what have you, but actually have many of those functions be automated and work most of the time.
Right. It's really a matter of putting more thinking to this, because since most people are just recreating the old world with the new technology instead of reimagining things. Like even in the metaverse, there we know that land ownership is a problem in the real world, but they're just selling plots in the metaverse as well. Like after we already had ideas like the Arbeiter's tax and better mechanisms, but people are still just recreating the old.
Exactly. And I mean, but at the same time, I think that's just the start. At some point, the beauty is there is no real scarcity. Like you can create artificial one. That doesn't work around, or someone new comes in, it doesn't cost create a better version of of that scarcity chance land, virtual land, right? And we're even in the beginning, we're literally talking about pixels, etc. What's coming up is VR, multimedia experiences, all of that. So I don't think anything will stick around that tries to survive on keeping scarcity, keeping the old system that's based on scarcity and leaderboards, if you will, but actually at the same time, I don't really mind in a sense as long as it helps to actually build the infrastructure. That's still something like all of these. The whole of DeFi uses the same financial instruments in place, and the same things happen, right? It shouldn't be a surprise, but at the same time, they are building the infrastructure. They are testing combinations of smart contracts and combinations or more or less complex logic and figure out what works, what doesn't. I try to see it more from that perspective, that that's needed too. And if it takes to keep it or start it with the old game rules, but as long as we are building this infrastructure out in the open, we do have an option. a choice, right? But for that, I guess that's where we definitely agree is mindset change doesn't just happen. It is something active, like you can't make it happen in a sense. And kind of there is a lot of demand for that actually. Like people are really looking and searching for other ways, more consciously than ever.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. But we are still super early, and there definitely are a lot of people looking for better ways. And yeah, I think it's also a great point to end this on here. I love this conversation. And yeah, we don't need to exchange tokens to be aligned.
Yes, exactly, right? I guess that's where abundance comes out of. You don't have to build on that if you have all it needs basically to create these systems. We do have all of the resources that we need.
And I have one question for you left, which is something I ask every guest on this podcast. If you had to give one advice to metagame, what would it be?
Um,
It can be cheesy.
no. I'm just because like literally all of the advice I would have given based on my maybe even knowledge about metagame and how you play out things that is maybe even already obsolete because you move so fast. You mentioned five things that would have been literally these playbooks that they are different and that you also take care of not just replacing or playing the same meta game. Knowing there has literally in this current system there are meta gamers, right? Those who currently plan on getting to Mars and maybe they can fare well. But that's the point. Like, how do we find a balance? How do we, how well can we disseminate that direction, find that resonance and share that resonance at the same time knowing that there are many short and low hanging fruits to be had. You could be day trading all day and maybe create all the funds you need or lose all the funds you have. But right now this crypto space as it is, it's super fast moving, it's super exciting. We need it as it is, as I mentioned, that the infrastructure gets built, but just keep doing what you're doing to excite the participants of what is possible, right? Not just what is happening that seems exciting, but it's just the same game and meta game happening. Just make sure, keep your style and then make sure to onboard the people to this other game that we can have.
Awesome. Yeah, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. It was really nice exchanging with you.
Yeah, likewise.
And I will go and check out the Venus project and technology.
Yeah, the disclaimer I want to put up is that like the last time I watched the documentaries, they were cringe to me. Like a lot of the parts were pretty cringe, but there are good ideas in there, and I think like the overall idea is still makes sense.
Yeah, I'll come back and possibly hacking on those.
All right. Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for the invitation again. Take good care.
Yeah, see you too.
Bye bye.
Bye.